On a quiet August weekend in Tremonton, Utah, two police officers responded to what seemed like just another routine call, a string of 911 hang-ups. Within minutes, the situation spiraled into one of the deadliest nights this small community has ever seen. Shots were fired, lives were lost, and the town was left in shock. What began as a domestic disturbance quickly revealed itself to be something far more sinister. If you're just joining us, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the full breakdown of this case. The gunman, identified as Michael Bate, opened fire on responding officers, killing two and injuring both a sheriff's deputy and a police K-9. The chaos that followed was chilling: a standoff, terrified neighbors sheltering in place, and a suspect who at one point refused to come out. It wasn't law enforcement who convinced him to surrender, but everyday bystanders, who risked their lives to talk him down. This story is about bravery, betrayal, and the darker forces investigators now believe may have fueled the violence. Drop a comment below. Do you think this was the act of a lone gunman, or part of something bigger? As the investigation deepens, new evidence suggests Bate may have been connected to online extremist chatter. Words like Phase 1 complete found in his digital trail raise chilling possibilities. Was this a random act of violence, or the beginning of a coordinated campaign against law enforcement? In this series, we'll explore the officer's final moments, the suspect's background, and the unanswered questions haunting both Tremonton and the nation. Don't forget to subscribe and share, because this case may not just be about the past. It could be a warning for what's still to come. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When and where? On the evening of Sunday, August 17, 2025, just before 9:20 p.m., multiple 911 hang-up calls came from a residence near Bear River High School in Tremonton, Utah. Officers from the Tremonton Garland Police Department were dispatched to investigate. The first officer responds. A single officer arrived first and began speaking with a resident about a possible domestic disturbance. At that moment, a man emerged from the home carrying a high-powered rifle and opened fire, fatally shooting the officer on the spot. The second officer. Shortly after, another officer arrived at the scene and, tragically, was also shot and killed immediately by the same suspect. The deputy and K-9. A Box Elder County Sheriff's deputy, responding to assist, was struck by gunfire while inside his vehicle, and his service dog was also hit. Both were taken to the hospital and are recovering in fair condition. Who were the officers? Sergeant Lee Sorensen, 56, a 17-year law enforcement veteran, recently promoted to sergeant. He had received multiple awards for dedicated service. Officer Eric Estrada, 31, formerly a jail worker and patrol officer, remembered as a devoted family man and community-focused officer. The suspect taken into custody. Bystanders, remarkably, convinced the shooter to surrender his weapon, and he was taken into custody by responding officers without further violence. Charges and identity. The suspect, Michael Bate, 32 or 33, was booked into jail and faces charges of capital aggravated murder, first-degree felony attempted aggravated murder, and assault, a mix of capital and non-capital charges under Utah law. Community response. Silver linings of mourning, residents lined streets, flew flags at half-staff, and honored the fallen officers with a motorcade accompanied by bagpipes. Governor Spencer Cox called it a terrible and tragic night, ordering flags at half-staff and expressing statewide gratitude to law enforcement heroes. What's known about Bate's background, including disturbing prior incidents of domestic violence? Details from court filings and protective orders that point to a troubling pattern. How the investigation is progressing, what forensic evidence emerged, and what questions remain about motive and prevention. Stay tuned, the full story continues, just beyond the headlines. The deadly standoff. When officers arrived at the quiet Tremonton home after repeated 911 hang-up calls, they had no idea what was waiting behind those doors. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the stillness of the neighborhood. Two officers, dedicated public servants, were struck and fatally wounded before they even had a chance to retreat. A sheriff's deputy, rushing to provide backup, was shot and badly injured, while a loyal police K-9 was also caught in the crossfire. Neighbors described hearing a terrifying volley of shots, then silence, then more gunfire. Parents shielded their children, peering out from behind curtains, unsure if the violence would spill into the street. The scene quickly turned into a siege as SWAT teams and crisis negotiators were deployed. The suspect, identified as Ryan Michael Bate, had barricaded himself inside. Hours dragged on as police tried to establish contact. Shockingly, it wasn't tactical units that ended the standoff, it was local bystanders who convinced Bate to surrender peacefully. He was taken into custody, facing capital aggravated murder and attempted aggravated murder charges. But investigators soon uncovered something chilling in the aftermath, something that hinted this wasn't just a domestic dispute gone wrong. What they discovered next would send ripples far beyond Tremonton. When officers finally breached the home where Ryan Michael Bate had made his last stand, they expected signs of a chaotic gunfight, spent casings, broken furniture, bloodstains. What they didn't expect was the evidence suggesting that this tragedy may have been building for weeks. Inside, investigators found weapons strategically placed in multiple rooms. It wasn't random, it looked like Bate had prepared for a showdown, as though he had been waiting for police to come. On a table sat a partially written manifesto, rambling and angry, filled with references to betrayal, paranoia, and violence. Neighbors later told detectives about strange behavior in the days before the shooting, lights flickering on and off all night, Bate pacing outside in the dark, arguments heard through open windows. Some even claimed they had called police before, but nothing ever came of it. The most haunting discovery, however, wasn't the guns or the writings, it was the unanswered question, why? Why would a man turn his home into a battlefield, ambush responding officers, and nearly take down an entire law enforcement unit? Investigators are now piecing together his connections, his state of mind, and whether others might have influenced him. Because what they found in his phone records suggests this was bigger than one man acting alone. The hidden messages. When detectives seized Ryan Michael Bate's phone, they expected texts filled with angry rants or failed relationships. Instead, they found something chilling, encrypted messages exchanged in the days leading up to the shooting. The conversations weren't with family or friends, they were with anonymous usernames in private chat rooms. The tone was dark, filled with anti-police rhetoric and violent imagery. Some messages seemed to encourage Bate to make a stand, while others offered tactics for surviving the first minutes of a police raid. It raised a terrifying possibility: was this massacre the result of a single man's unraveling mind, or was he being pushed, radicalized, and emboldened by voices hiding behind screens? As investigators dug deeper, they discovered searches on Bate's devices for militia groups, law enforcement response times, and even body armor modifications. This wasn't random chaos, it looked like strategy. But perhaps the most disturbing clue was an unsent draft message recovered from his phone. It read, "They won't take me alive. If this ends me, someone else will finish what I started." The FBI has now joined the case, combing through every digital breadcrumb to see if anyone else knew or worse, encouraged what was about to unfold. And just as agents were mapping his online world, another piece of evidence surfaced, something that might connect him to a larger network. The classified file. Locked, leaked, confidential/eyes only. Subject: Bate, Ryan Michael. Case reference: UT0825 OpFatal. Summary. Recovered digital forensics and background intel suggests subject Ryan Michael Bate was not operating in complete isolation. Federal review of his encrypted chat activity reveals consistent communication with at least 3 unidentified handles linked to fringe anti-government and anti-law enforcement groups under current counterterrorism monitoring. Key findings. Weapon preparation: subject modified his rifle with unlawful aftermarket components, suggesting guidance from a source familiar with tactical breaching and counter-police engagements. Psychological conditioning: chat transcripts indicate deliberate encouragement of escalation. Subject was repeatedly told to make the call and prove loyalty. Network suspicions: analysts flagged similarities between these communications and threads found on forums previously tied to domestic extremist cells in Montana, Idaho, and Nevada. Prior red flags: subject Bate had been reported in 2023 for harassment and unlawful possession of firearms, but charges were reduced. Local agencies were never alerted to potential radicalization risk. Critical discovery: a handwritten note was found in his garage during evidence recovery. It contained only 3 words. Phase 1 complete. This phrase has appeared in other unrelated FBI investigations involving radical anti-law enforcement plots.
Assessment.
While Bate acted as the triggerman, intelligence strongly suggests he may have been influenced, guided, or even recruited into a wider underground network.
Federal task forces are quietly cross-referencing known operatives. Warning status, investigation ongoing. Public release restricted. But here's the real question: if this was Phase 1, then what is Phase 2? Gators quietly admit, what they uncovered in the days after suggests otherwise. Federal task forces now believe Bate's actions may have been just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Those cryptic chats, the phrase Phase 1 complete, and the timing of the attack all point to coordination, or at least inspiration, from a shadowy underground network that thrives on targeting law enforcement. So far, no public arrests have been announced beyond Bate. Yet behind closed doors, investigators are cross-referencing cases in Idaho, Nevada, and Montana, where officers reported strange threats and surveillance of their patrol routines.
The similarities are impossible to ignore. Even more disturbing?
A sealed court document accidentally leaked online for just a few minutes mentioned the words
"Operational directives ongoing. Multiple regions under review." If true, it means the Tremonton tragedy wasn't an isolated event, it may have been a warning shot. Now, families of the fallen officers wait for justice.
And the community waits for answers. But the question that lingers unanswered, heavy, chilling, is this.
Backhand index pointing right: was Tremonton the end of the violence, or just the beginning of a war no one is ready for?